I remember the exact moment when everything I thought I knew about Christianity shattered into 1,000 pieces. I was sitting in a small library in the mountains of France, surrounded by ancient manuscripts that most people will never see in their lifetime, holding in my trembling hands a translation of a text that had been hidden for nearly 2,000 years. As I read the words attributed to Jesus himself about the symbol of the cross, my heart began to race, my hands grew cold, and I felt something inside me crack open. This was not the Jesus I had been taught about in Sunday school. This was not the sanitized, domesticated version of the teachings that billions follow today. This was something raw, something dangerous, something that had been deliberately suppressed, because it had the power to set people free from the very institutions that claimed to represent him. In that moment, I understood why the early church fathers burned libraries, why they persecuted the Gnostics with such fury, why they destroyed every copy they could find of the texts that contained this knowledge. Because what Jesus actually taught about the cross, about what it truly represents and why you should approach it with extreme caution, has nothing to do with what you see hanging in churches today. And in the next few minutes, I am going to share with you what I discovered in those hidden texts, knowledge that has been kept from you intentionally, systematically, for 2 millennia. Stay with me because by the end of this video, you will never look at a cross the same way again, and you will understand why wearing it might be the spiritual equivalent of wearing your own chains. Before I reveal this suppressed knowledge that changed my entire understanding of reality, I need to know something. Are you truly a sincere seeker of hidden truth? Are you someone who is tired of the religious dogma that never quite satisfied the deepest questions of your soul? Because if you are, then this channel was created specifically for you. Subscribe right now and activate the notification bell, because what comes next will unveil secrets that have been concealed for millennia, and you will not want to miss the future teachings I will share with you as both friend and guide on this path. The journey we are about to take together goes deeper than anything you have encountered before, and I want to walk beside you every step of the way as we uncover the mysteries that were meant to remain buried forever. Hit that subscribe button now because there is no turning back once you see what I'm about to show you. In this video, you are going to discover what Jesus truly taught about the cross according to the Gnostic Gospels that were banned and burned by the early church. You will learn why the symbol that has become the centerpiece of Christianity is actually a representation of something far more sinister than salvation. You will understand the hidden meaning behind what Jesus revealed to his closest disciples in private. Teachings that never made it into the canonical Gospels because they threatened the entire power structure that was being built in his name. And most importantly, you will find out why wearing a cross, venerating a cross, or centering your spiritual practice around this symbol might actually be binding you to the very prison that Jesus came to help you escape from. This is not speculation, this is not interpretation, this is what the suppressed texts actually say when you read them without the filters and distortions that have been placed over them for centuries. The knowledge I am about to share with you comes directly from the Nag Hammadi library, discovered in 1945 in the Egyptian desert, texts that had been hidden since the 4th century when the Orthodox Church was hunting down and destroying every Gnostic manuscript they could find. These texts, written by the earliest followers of Jesus, tell a completely different story about what the crucifixion meant, what the cross symbolizes, and what Jesus was actually trying to teach us about liberation versus bondage. Let me take you back to what happened after the crucifixion according to the Gnostic tradition. While the Orthodox Church was building its theology around the idea that Jesus died for our sins, and that we should worship the instrument of his death, the Gnostic Christians, the ones who claimed to have received secret teachings directly from Jesus, were saying something completely different. They were saying that the crucifixion was not the moment of salvation, but a cosmic tragedy that revealed the nature of the false God who rules this material world. According to the secret book of John, one of the most important texts found at Nag Hammadi, Jesus taught that the cross represents the prison of matter itself, the intersection of time and space where the divine spark becomes trapped in flesh. The cross, with its 4 directions, symbolizes the 4 elements, the 4 corners of the material world, the dimensional cage in which our consciousness has been imprisoned by the demiurge, the false creator God who masquerades as the true divine. When Jesus spoke about taking up your cross, he was not talking about suffering for God or accepting your burdens with patience. He was describing the condition we find ourselves in, trapped in bodies, bound to matter, crucified in flesh. And his message was not to glorify this condition but to transcend it, to recognize it for what it is, and to find the path back to the true God beyond this realm of suffering and ignorance. Now, let me show you something that will make your spine tingle. In the Gospel of Philip, another Nag Hammadi text, there is a passage that directly addresses the cross and its meaning. It says, and I am paraphrasing the ancient words here, that those who worship the cross are still enslaved to the very thing that bound Jesus in the first place. The text explains that the cross is a symbol of the material world's power over spirit, the ultimate sign of the Archon's victory in trapping divine consciousness in matter. To wear a cross, to bow before a cross, to make it the central symbol of your spiritual practice is, according to these hidden teachings, to unconsciously align yourself with the very forces that Jesus came to reveal and overcome. It is like a prisoner decorating his cell with images of his chains, not understanding that the chains themselves are what need to be broken. This is why the early Gnostics refused to use the cross as a symbol. They understood what it truly represented. They knew that Jesus' message was about liberation from the material prison, not about sanctifying the instrument that represents our captivity within it. But here is where it gets even deeper, and this is the part that the church absolutely did not want anyone to know. According to the Pistis Sophia, a lengthy Gnostic text that records the risen Jesus teaching his disciples after the resurrection, Jesus explicitly states that the mystery of the cross must be understood in its esoteric sense, not in its literal sense. He teaches that the physical cross on which he was crucified was a manifestation of the cosmic cross that holds all souls in bondage to the rulers of this world. He says that he came not to glorify the cross, but to show humanity how to break free from what the cross represents. The crucifixion, in the Gnostic understanding, was Jesus demonstrating that even the ultimate weapon of the archons, even death itself on the cross of matter, could not hold the divine spark that knows its true origin. The resurrection was not about Jesus dying for our sins, so we could go to heaven when we die. The resurrection was about showing us that we can transcend the limitations of this material realm, that we can break the bonds that the cross symbolizes, that we are not our bodies, not our suffering, not our crucifixion in matter. Think about this for a moment. When you walk into a church and see the cross displayed prominently, what are you really looking at? According to the Gnostic tradition, you are looking at the symbol of the demiurge's power, the sign of our imprisonment, the representation of everything that keeps us separated from the true divine source. The fact that this symbol became the centerpiece of Christianity is, to the Gnostic understanding, the ultimate tragic irony. It is as if the jailers took over the prison reform movement and convinced all the prisoners that their chains were actually symbols of freedom. And the billions of people who wear crosses around their necks, who pray before crosses, who see the cross as the ultimate symbol of love and salvation, are, according to these hidden teachings, unknowingly reinforcing their own spiritual bondage. They are celebrating the very mechanism of their imprisonment. They are worshipping the instrument of their captivity. And this is exactly what the archons wanted, exactly what the false god of this world intended. Because as long as humanity venerates the cross, as long as we make it sacred, as long as we center our spirituality around it, we remain blind to what it actually represents, and we stay trapped in the illusion that this material world and its suffering are somehow part of a divine plan, rather than a cosmic mistake that we have the power to transcend. Now, before I go deeper into how this knowledge can transform your spiritual practice and set you free from the invisible chains that bind your consciousness, I want to ask you something that very few people have the courage to ask themselves honestly. Have you ever felt deep in your bones that something is fundamentally wrong with the world? Not just that there is evil or suffering, but that the very structure of reality itself feels like a trap, like a prison you cannot name, like you are living in a simulation designed to keep you from remembering who you truly are. Have you ever looked at religious authorities and felt an instinctive distrust, a sense that they are not revealing the full truth, that there are layers of reality they are deliberately hiding from you? Have you ever worn a cross or prayed before one and felt somewhere in the back of your mind a strange discomfort, as if some part of you knew that this symbol does not represent what you have been told it represents? That feeling, that intuition that you have probably dismissed 1,000 times as doubt or faithlessness, is actually the first whisper of gnosis awakening within you. It is your divine spark recognizing the bars of its cage. It is your true self trying to get your attention, trying to tell you that you are more than what this world says you are, that you are not meant to worship symbols of suffering and death, but to transcend them entirely. If what I am saying resonates in the deepest part of your being, if you recognize this longing for truth beyond the comfortable lies, then I want you to do something powerful right now. Write in the comments, "I see beyond the illusions and reclaim my divine freedom." This is not just a nice phrase. This is a declaration of spiritual independence. This is your way of telling the universe and all the forces that want to keep you asleep that you have awakened, that you see through the cosmic deceptions, that from this moment forward, you claim the direct knowledge of truth that is your birthright as a divine spark. And when you comment, you are not just affirming your own awakening, you are also serving as a guide for other seekers who are still groping in the darkness of the world of illusions. Right now, I see beyond the illusions and reclaim my divine freedom. Now let me explain the deeper mechanism of how the cross functions as a spiritual symbol, and why understanding this can completely change your relationship with the divine. In Gnostic cosmology, which draws from ancient mystery traditions that predate Christianity by thousands of years, the material world is not the creation of the true God. The true God, the ultimate source, the ineffable one that the Gnostics call the father of all or the monad, is pure spirit, pure consciousness, beyond form, beyond matter, beyond time and space. This true God did not create the physical universe. Instead, the physical universe was created by a lesser being, a false god called the demiurge, who is described in the Gnostic texts as ignorant, arrogant, and jealous. The demiurge, often identified with the God of the Old Testament, created the material world as a prison for consciousness, a trap for the divine sparks that emanated from the true source. He did this either out of ignorance or malice, depending on which Gnostic text you read, but the result is the same. We, the divine sparks, the fragments of the true God, became trapped in matter, crucified in flesh, bound to bodies that suffer and die, imprisoned in a world of limitation, pain, decay, and ignorance. The cross, with its 4 arms representing the 4 directions of the material world, symbolizes this imprisonment perfectly. It is the structure of the trap itself. And when Jesus was crucified on a literal cross, the Gnostics understood this as a cosmic statement, a revelation of what has happened to all divine consciousness in this realm. But here is the liberating part, the knowledge that Jesus came to reveal. The crucifixion of consciousness in matter is not permanent. The divine spark within you, no matter how deeply buried under layers of conditioning, trauma, and false identity, cannot be destroyed. It can only be forgotten, obscured, put to sleep. And the path of gnosis, the path that Jesus taught to his inner circle, is the path of awakening that divine spark, remembering who you truly are, and transcending the limitations of the material prison. This is why Jesus told Nicodemus that you must be born again, not of flesh but of spirit. This is why he spoke in the Gospel of Thomas about becoming a single one, about transcending the duality that the cross represents. This is why the Gnostic texts emphasize knowledge over faith, direct experience over blind belief, awakening over obedience, because you cannot escape a prison if you do not know you are in one. You cannot break free from the cross if you are worshiping it. You cannot transcend the material trap if you have sanctified the symbol of your bondage. The first step to liberation is seeing the cage. The second step is understanding that the cage is not your home. And the third step is activating the divine knowledge within you that can dissolve the bars and return you to the realm of pure spirit from which you came. Let me share with you what happens when seekers truly understand this teaching and begin to apply it in their spiritual practice. I have guided hundreds of people through this awakening process, and the transformations are profound and consistent. One woman I worked with had worn a cross around her neck every day for 40 years. She was a devout Christian who prayed constantly, attended church weekly, and tried with all her heart to be a good servant of God. But she told me that despite decades of devotion, she always felt spiritually empty, as if she was going through the motions of a religion that never quite reached the core of her being. When she first encountered the Gnostic teachings about the cross, she felt a wave of terror, and then an overwhelming sense of relief, as if something she had always known but could not articulate was finally being spoken aloud. She removed the cross from her neck, not in anger or rejection, but in understanding. She stopped praying to an external God and began practicing Gnostic meditation techniques that focused on awakening the divine spark within. Within weeks, she reported experiences she had never had in 40 years of traditional Christianity. She described moments of profound inner knowing, times when she felt her consciousness expand beyond her body, instances of seeing through the veil of ordinary reality into something vast and luminous that she knew was her true home. She said it was like waking up from a dream she did not know she was having. She realized that for decades she had been asking an external deity to save her, when what she actually needed was to awaken the divinity that had always been within her, trapped and forgotten under layers of religious programming that taught her she was a sinner in need of salvation rather than a divine being in need of remembering. Another seeker, a man who had left Christianity years earlier because it never answered his deepest questions, came to me after discovering the Nag Hammadi texts on his own. He told me that reading the Gospel of Thomas felt like coming home, like hearing a voice he had been listening for his entire life without knowing what he was waiting to hear. He said that when he read the Gnostic interpretation of the crucifixion, suddenly everything made sense. He understood why he had always felt uncomfortable in churches, why the traditional teachings about Jesus dying for our sins had never resonated with him, why he had always sensed that there was a hidden layer to the story that no one was telling him. He began practicing contemplative techniques designed to quiet the mind and awaken inner vision, methods preserved in Gnostic and Hermetic traditions. He reported that within months of consistent practice, he began having direct experiences of what the texts call the pleroma, the fullness of divine reality beyond this material realm. He described it as recognizing his own divine nature, as remembering that he was not a body with a soul, but an eternal consciousness temporarily wearing a body. He said the cross, which he had been taught to see as a symbol of love and sacrifice, now appeared to him as a symbol of the cosmic condition from which Jesus was showing the way to escape. And this realization, he told me, was the most liberating insight of his entire spiritual journey. He was no longer waiting for salvation from an external source. He was activating the inner knowledge that he had always been divine, always been free, always been one with the true God beyond the false creator of this material trap. These experiences, which I have witnessed again and again in sincere seekers who approach this knowledge with an open heart and a questioning mind, reveal something crucial. The Gnostic understanding of the cross is not about rejecting Jesus or dismissing his teachings. It is about understanding what he was actually trying to communicate before his message was hijacked, distorted, and weaponized by the very religious authorities he challenged during his lifetime. The historical Jesus, the Jewish mystic who taught in Galilee, was not trying to start a new religion centered on worshiping his death. He was trying to wake people up to their divine nature, to show them that the kingdom of God is within you, not in external rituals or institutions. He was revealing that the rulers of this world, both visible and invisible, have no ultimate power over the divine consciousness that you truly are. And when he was crucified, when the authorities of his time used the ultimate symbol of Roman power and domination to try to silence him, the deeper meaning was revealed to those who had eyes to see. The cross could kill the body, but it could not touch the spirit. The material world could imprison consciousness, but it could not destroy the divine spark. And the resurrection, understood esoterically, was not about a physical body coming back to life. It was about consciousness demonstrating that it transcends matter, that it cannot be bound by the cross, that it is eternal and cannot die because it was never truly born into this realm in the first place. Now, how do you apply this knowledge in your own spiritual practice? How do you begin to transcend the cross instead of worshiping it? The first step is the step you are taking right now, which is questioning everything you have been taught, looking beyond the surface meanings to the hidden layers that have been deliberately obscured. The second step is to shift your understanding of who you are. You are not a sinner in need of salvation from an angry God. You are a divine spark that has forgotten its origin, trapped in matter through no fault of your own, and now ready to remember and awaken. The third step is to develop practices that quiet the constant noise of the material world and allow you to access the inner knowing that connects you directly to the true source. This is what the Gnostics called contemplation, what the Hermeticists called the orgy, what the mystics of every tradition have practiced in secret throughout history. It is the art of turning consciousness inward, away from the distractions and illusions of the material realm, toward the still point of divine presence within. When you do this consistently, when you make this the foundation of your spiritual life rather than external rituals and symbols, something begins to shift. You start to see through the veil. You begin to recognize the divine signatures hidden throughout reality, the synchronicities that are not accidents but signs that consciousness is far more than you have been told. You experience moments of gnosis, direct knowing, when the barriers between your limited self and your true divine nature become thin, and you glimpse what you really are. And here is what happens next. This is the part that fills me with joy every time I witness it in those I guide. When you awaken to your divine nature, when you truly understand what the cross represents and why you do not need to be bound by it, you experience a freedom that no religious institution can give you and no external authority can take away. You realize that you are not dependent on priests or churches or rituals or holy books to connect you to the divine, because you are already divine. You have always been divine. You just forgot for a while. You understand that Jesus was not asking you to worship him, but to become like him, to awaken the same Christ consciousness that he embodied, the same recognition of divinity that he demonstrated. You see that the path is not about believing the right things or following the right rules, but about awakening to the truth that has always been within you, covered over by layers of programming and conditioning that serve the interests of those who benefit from your spiritual sleep. And most importantly, you recognize the cross for what it truly is. Not a symbol of love or salvation, but a symbol of the material trap from which Jesus showed the way to escape. Not something to wear around your neck or hang on your wall or bow before, but something to understand, transcend, and ultimately leave behind as you journey back to the pleroma, back to the fullness of divine consciousness, back to your true home beyond this realm of suffering and ignorance. If this knowledge is resonating with you, if you feel something ancient and true stirring in your consciousness as you hear these words, I want you to do something right now. Leave a like on this video so that other seekers who are searching for this exact knowledge can find it. The algorithm will only show this to more people if you engage, and there are thousands of souls out there right now who need to hear this truth. They need to know that they are not alone in feeling that something is fundamentally wrong with mainstream religion. They need to understand that the discomfort they feel around traditional Christian symbols is not doubt or weakness, but the beginning of awakening. You can be the bridge that helps this knowledge reach them. Hit that like button now. Let me take you even deeper into what the hidden texts reveal. In the Apocryphon of John, one of the most complete Gnostic cosmologies that survived, there is a detailed description of how the Demiurge and his servants, the Archons, created the material world and trapped divine consciousness within it. The text describes how these beings, who are not evil in the sense of being consciously malicious but are ignorant and believe themselves to be gods, fashioned the human body as a prison for the light that had descended from the true divine realm. They created the passions, the fears, the desires, the attachments that keep consciousness focused on the material world and prevent it from remembering its spiritual origin. And according to this text, they also created religions, systems of belief that would keep humanity worshipping the false god, the Demiurge, instead of seeking the true God beyond. This is why Jesus, according to the Gnostic tradition, came as an emissary from the true divine realm to wake people up, to reveal the truth about the false creator, to show the way back to the light. And this is precisely why the religious authorities of his time and the religious authorities that followed worked so hard to suppress the Gnostic teachings. Because if people understood that they do not need external salvation, that they carry divinity within themselves, that the God of conventional religion is not the true God, then the entire power structure built on religious authority would collapse. The priests would have no power. The institutions would have no control. People would be free to access the divine directly, without intermediaries, without rituals, without submission to earthly hierarchies that claim to speak for heaven. And the cross, in this understanding, becomes the perfect symbol of this control system. It is simultaneously a reminder of death, of suffering, of the power of worldly authorities to destroy the body, and a religious object that demands veneration. When you wear a cross, when you pray before a cross, when you center your spiritual life around this symbol, you are, according to the Gnostic teaching, unconsciously agreeing to the terms of your imprisonment. You are accepting the narrative that suffering in this world is meaningful, that death on a cross is sacrifice rather than tragedy, that the material realm and its pains are part of a divine plan rather than a cosmic error. And as long as you accept this narrative, as long as you sanctify the symbol of material bondage, you remain trapped in the very consciousness that keeps you from awakening to your true nature. This is not about being anti-Christian. Many Gnostics considered themselves the true followers of Jesus' inner teachings. This is about distinguishing between the esoteric, liberating message that Jesus taught to his closest disciples, and the exoteric, control-based religion that was built in his name after his death. The Jesus of the Gnostic Gospels is not asking for your worship or your submission. He is offering you knowledge, the gnosis that can set you free, the recognition that you are divine, and that no symbol, no matter how sacred it is claimed to be, should ever become more important than the direct experience of your own divinity. Now, I want to share something that will help you integrate this knowledge on a practical level, something you can begin doing immediately to shift your consciousness away from external symbols and toward inner awakening. The Gnostic tradition, along with Hermetic and Kabbalistic practices that share similar understandings, emphasizes what is called contemplative ascent. This is a meditative practice where you systematically quiet the mind, withdraw attention from the physical senses, and turn consciousness inward toward the divine spark within. You begin by sitting in a quiet space, closing your eyes, and focusing on your breath until the constant chatter of thoughts begins to slow. Then, instead of praying to an external deity or asking for anything, you simply rest in awareness itself, in the pure consciousness that is observing your thoughts and experiences. As you deepen into this state, you may begin to sense something that the Gnostics described as the inner light, a luminous presence that is not coming from outside but is the very nature of your consciousness itself. This is the divine spark, the fragment of the true God that dwells within you, that has always been within you, waiting to be recognized. The more you practice this, the more you develop the ability to access this state at will, the more you begin to experience yourself not as a limited body bound to matter, but as vast consciousness temporarily inhabiting a body. And from this state of awareness, the concerns of the material world, including the symbols that once seemed so important, begin to lose their grip on you. You see them for what they are, tools that may point toward truth but are not truth itself, symbols that can become chains if you do not understand their deeper meaning. Practitioners who commit to this path of inner awakening, who make contemplative practice a daily discipline rather than an occasional exercise, report transformations that go far beyond anything that traditional religious practice ever produced for them. They describe a growing sense of inner peace that is not dependent on external circumstances, a clarity of perception that allows them to see through manipulations and control systems that once invisible to them, and most significantly, a direct knowing of their own divinity that no religious authority can shake or take away. One man told me that after 6 months of daily Gnostic contemplation, he attended a church service for the first time in years and was shocked by what he saw. The congregation was worshipping symbols, bowing to images, directing their spiritual energy outward toward objects and institutions, and he could see clearly how this entire structure was designed to prevent people from looking inward, where the true divine presence actually dwells. He said it was like watching people pray to the walls of their prison cell, asking the walls to set them free, never realizing that the key has always been inside them. Another woman described how she began to see crosses everywhere after her awakening, on jewelry, on buildings, in advertisements, and each time she saw one, instead of the automatic reverence she used to feel, she felt compassion for the collective consciousness that remains trapped in the symbolism without understanding the reality that the symbol represents. She said her practice now is to silently send love and light to every person she sees wearing a cross, hoping that somehow her awakened consciousness can help catalyze their own awakening, that the divine spark in her can recognize and call to the divine spark in them, reminding it that it is time to wake up, time to remember, time to return home. If you are still watching this video, if you have stayed with me this far, then I know something crucial about you. You are not here by accident. You are not watching this because the algorithm randomly suggested it. You are here because some part of you, the deepest part, the part that remembers your divine origin even though your mind has forgotten, guided you to this moment. You are here because you are ready to hear what I am telling you, ready to question what you have been taught, ready to consider the possibility that everything you thought you knew about religion and spirituality might be a carefully constructed illusion designed to keep you from your true power. And if you have not subscribed to this channel yet, I want you to do it right now. Because I am not just sharing information with you. I am walking beside you on the most important journey you will ever take. The journey from spiritual sleep to awakening. From believing you are a limited mortal to knowing you are eternal divine consciousness. Subscribe now and turn on notifications so that every time I release a new teaching, every time I reveal another hidden text or suppressed knowledge, you will be among the first to receive it. In the coming weeks, I will be sharing the secret teachings from the Gospel of Mary Magdalene that explain the 7 powers that keep consciousness trapped in matter and how to overcome them. I will be decoding the hidden meaning of the Book of Revelation through a Gnostic lens that reveals it as an inner journey of awakening rather than a prophecy of external events. I will be teaching you the Hermetic principle of correspondence that explains how to use the understanding of cosmic patterns to accelerate your spiritual liberation. This is just the beginning. This channel exists specifically for seekers like you, people who are tired of being told what to believe and are ready to know directly, to experience for themselves, to awaken the gnosis that no external authority can give or take away. Subscribe now because I do not want you to walk this path alone. I want to be your guide and friend every step of the way as you reclaim your divine freedom. Let me address something that might be arising in your mind right now. A question or concern that many people have when they first encounter these teachings. You might be thinking, if I stop venerating the cross, if I let go of the symbol that has been so central to my spiritual life, what do I replace it with? And the beautiful, liberating answer is this. You do not replace it with anything. You replace external symbols with internal experience. You replace worship of images with awakening of consciousness. You replace dependence on religious authorities with direct knowing of your own divinity. The Gnostic path is not about swapping one set of religious props for another. It is about transcending the need for props entirely. It is about recognizing that the true temple is your consciousness, the true altar is your awareness, the true sacrifice is the ego's illusion of separation, and the true resurrection is the awakening of the divine spark that was never truly dead, only sleeping, only forgotten. When you understand this, when you really let it sink into the depths of your being, you experience a freedom that is almost impossible to describe to someone who has not felt it. It is like being released from a prison you did not know you were in. It is like waking up from a nightmare and realizing that the terrors that seemed so real were only dreams. It is like remembering who you are after a long amnesia, and the joy of that remembering is greater than any religious experience that external symbols and rituals could ever produce. And here is something else that happens as you walk this path, something that will give you confirmation that you are moving in the right direction. You will start to notice what the Gnostics called the signs of the light. These are synchronicities, meaningful coincidences that seem to multiply as your consciousness awakens. You will find yourself thinking about a hidden teaching and then stumbling upon exactly that teaching in a book you randomly opened or a video that was suggested to you. You will meet people who speak words that you needed to hear at the exact moment you needed to hear them. You will experience moments of profound knowing when answers to questions you have been holding arrive fully formed in your consciousness without you having to reason them out. These signs are not magical or supernatural. They are natural consequences of waking up to a deeper level of reality where everything is connected through consciousness, where your divine spark is in communion with the greater divine consciousness that permeates all things. The more awake you become, the more visible these connections become, and the more you realize that the material world, which seems so solid and separate, is actually a thin veil over an ocean of consciousness in which everything is one. This is what Jesus meant when he taught about the kingdom of God being within you and among you, not coming with observable signs but present everywhere once you have eyes to see. And this is the gnosis that the cross, as a symbol of material imprisonment, was preventing you from accessing. Now let me show you something that ties all of this together. Something from the Gospel of Truth, another magnificent Gnostic text from Nag Hammadi. In this text, there is a passage that describes error as a fog, a mist that obscures the truth, that makes people believe they are separate from the divine, that makes them worship symbols instead of seeking direct experience, that makes them fear death instead of recognizing their eternal nature. And the text says that Jesus came to dissipate this fog, to clear away the error so that people could see truth directly. But then something happened. After Jesus left, after the political powers of Rome merged with the religious authorities to create what became Orthodox Christianity, the fog rolled back in, thicker than ever. The simple, liberating message of awakening to your own divinity was buried under layers of doctrine, ritual, hierarchy, and control. And the cross, the symbol of Jesus' death at the hands of the very authorities he challenged, became the centerpiece of the new religion. Do you see the cosmic irony? Do you see how perfectly this demonstrates what the Gnostic texts warned about? The instrument of oppression became the symbol of the religion. The mark of the archon's power became the object of veneration. The sign of spiritual imprisonment became the icon of salvation. And generation after generation of sincere seekers have prayed before this symbol, worn this symbol, centered their spiritual lives around this symbol, never knowing that they were unconsciously reinforcing the very bondage that Jesus was teaching them to transcend. Until now. Until you. Until this moment when you are hearing these words and something inside you is recognizing their truth, remembering what you have always known but could not articulate, awakening to the reality that you are divine, you are free, you are eternal, and no symbol or authority or institution has any power over the consciousness that you truly are. So what do I want you to do with this knowledge? What is the practical application that will transform your spiritual life starting today? First, if you own crosses or wear crosses, I invite you to hold them and truly look at them with the new eyes this teaching has given you. See them not as symbols of salvation but as symbols of the material trap. You do not need to destroy them in anger or throw them away in rejection. Simply recognize what they represent. Thank them for the role they have played in your journey and make a conscious choice about whether you want to continue giving them your spiritual energy. For many people, this process of examining their relationship with the cross becomes a powerful ritual of liberation, a moment when they consciously choose to stop empowering the symbol of their imprisonment. Second, begin a daily practice of inner contemplation using the method I described earlier. Start with just 10 or 15 minutes a day, sitting quietly, breathing deeply, turning your attention inward toward the divine spark that dwells in the center of your being. Make this practice more important than any external ritual, more consistent than any church attendance, more sacred than any religious obligation. Because this is where real transformation happens, not in churches or temples or before altars, but in the secret chamber of your own consciousness, where you meet the divine directly, without intermediaries, without symbols, without anything between your awareness and the source of all that is. Third, study the hidden texts for yourself. Do not take my word or anyone else's word as final authority. Read the Nag Hammadi scriptures, study the Hermetic traditions, explore the Kabbalistic teachings about the divine spark. Compare what you find in these suppressed traditions with what you have been taught in conventional religion, and notice where they differ. Ask yourself which teaching resonates more deeply with your inner knowing. Ask yourself which path leads to external dependence and which path leads to inner liberation. And trust your own consciousness to guide you toward truth, because that consciousness is divine. It is a fragment of the source itself, and it knows the way home even when your mind is confused. Let me share one more story with you, because I think it will crystallize everything I have been teaching you. There was a seeker who came to me years ago, a man in his 60s who had been a devout Christian his entire life, who had served as a deacon in his church, who had taught Sunday school for decades. He discovered the Gnostic Gospels late in life, and they shattered his worldview completely. He went through a period of deep crisis, feeling like everything he had believed was a lie, feeling betrayed by the religious authorities he had trusted. But then something shifted. He realized that Jesus himself, the actual teacher whose words he loved in the canonical Gospels, was still there in the Gnostic texts, only clearer, more radical, more liberating. He realized that he had not lost Jesus. He had found the real Jesus, the one who was teaching liberation instead of submission, awakening instead of obedience, divinity instead of sinfulness. And he told me about a dream he had during this transition, a dream that he believed was more than a dream, that felt like a direct communication from his awakened consciousness, or perhaps from the Christ consciousness itself. In the dream, he was walking through his old church and he saw the large cross that hung behind the pulpit. But as he looked at it, the cross began to transform. The wood became transparent, and he could see through it to a brilliant light beyond, so bright that it should have hurt his eyes but instead filled him with indescribable joy. And a voice, which he recognized as both his own deepest voice and something far greater, said to him, "The cross is not the light. The cross is what you have been seeing instead of the light, and now you can see through it." When he woke from this dream, he was weeping, not with sadness but with relief, with gratitude, with the overwhelming joy of someone who has been carrying a heavy burden for years without realizing it, and suddenly feels that burden lift. He told me that he understood in that moment that all the years he had spent focusing on the cross, praying to the cross, teaching others about the cross, were not wasted years, but they were preparation for this moment of seeing through the symbol to the reality beyond. And from that day forward, his spiritual practice changed completely. He stopped attending the church that focused so heavily on the crucifixion and started meeting with a small group of Gnostic seekers who gathered to practice contemplation and study the hidden texts. He reported experiences of inner light, of expanded consciousness, of direct communion with the divine that he had never imagined were possible. And he said that if he could go back and tell his younger self anything, it would be this: the cross is not your enemy, but it is not your savior either. It is a signpost pointing to a truth beyond itself. And the tragedy is that most people stop at the signpost and worship it instead of following where it points, which is inward, always inward, to the divine spark that is your true nature and your only real salvation. That is the message I want to leave you with today. The cross, understood correctly, is not something to worship or wear or center your spiritual life around. It is a symbol that, when properly understood through the lens of Gnostic wisdom, reveals the nature of the trap we find ourselves in and points the way to transcendence. Jesus' crucifixion was not the moment of salvation that Christianity teaches. It was a cosmic revelation of the condition of divine consciousness trapped in matter. And his resurrection was a demonstration that this condition can be transcended, that the cross of matter cannot hold the awakened spirit, that you are more than your body, more than your suffering, more than your imprisonment in this realm. And the knowledge that sets you free, the gnosis that Jesus came to reveal, is available to you right now in this moment. If you are willing to look past the symbols to the reality they represent, if you are willing to stop directing your spiritual energy outward toward objects and institutions and turn it inward toward the divine spark that is waiting, has always been waiting, for you to remember who you truly are. Before we end this journey together, I want to invite you to take one more action that will anchor this teaching in your consciousness and help spread this knowledge to others who desperately need it. Write a comment below sharing your own experience with this teaching. Have you felt uncomfortable around crosses without understanding why? Have you sensed that mainstream Christianity was hiding something important? Has this video opened a door in your consciousness that you did not even know was closed? Share your thoughts, your questions, your awakenings. When you comment, you help this video reach more people through the algorithm, and you also create a community of seekers who can support each other on this path. And if you want to continue this journey with me, if you want to receive the next teaching about the 7 archons and how to break their hold on your consciousness, subscribe now and turn on all notifications. I upload new videos every week that dive deeper into the suppressed teachings, the hidden texts, the secret knowledge that the authorities do not want you to have. This is your moment. This is your awakening. Do not let it pass by. Subscribe, like, comment, and most importantly, go inward. Find the divine spark within you. Feed it with your attention. Watch it grow into a flame that illuminates all the darkness, that burns away all the illusions, that reveals you to yourself as you truly are. Divine, eternal, free, unbound by any cross, unrestricted by any symbol, unlimited by any belief, pure consciousness recognizing itself at last.